Hello, everybody. It is October 21st, 2020. Welcome to the Fifth Avenue podcast presented by the Fifth Avenue Cinema, Oregon's only student-run cinema, coming to you somewhat live from the safety of our homes. I wore a N95 mask in the shower. That's how safe I am. Giving you the latest in all things cinema. Today's podcast, we're moving along in our fall program with Owen's second selection. Yes, this is Owen's 2 weeks. It's a celebration with Tsai Ming Liang's 1993 film, Rebels of the Neon God. But this episode is also a double feature, as we will be pairing this film with Nicholas Ray's 1955 film, Rebel Without a Cause. So, it goes without saying that this is the Rebel episode. And of course, my name is Tracy. I am your host on this podcast, former projectionist. I still have the skill, I promise. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I want to shout out, I had one earlier. Oh, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to shout out the burger I'm going to order after this is over, because your boy's been hungry since 4. And yeah.
This is Madi Lou, cinema coordinator here at Fifth Avenue Cinema. They, them, theirs pronouns. My shout out today goes to Lucas Longacre of Screen Radar, who I had the great honor of doing an interview with. You should go check out his interview/article on how indie theaters survived the pandemic over on screenradar.com. It's focused all around some of the art houses in Portland, specifically preserving film and what that'll look like through a pandemic. We're lucky enough to get to continue to have our jobs, so you get to hear me feel a little guilty about that in that interview, but reading it made me cry. So that's how we're doing.
This is Owen, the exhaler of the podcast, the asthmatic of the podcast. I use he, him pronouns and his. And my shout out is gonna go to Elliot Smith, because today is the 17th year since his passing, and yes, he's my favorite artist of all time, and gonna use today to honor him. Yes,
Portland legend. He wasn't from here, but he made
grew up here, went to high school here.
Yeah, I mean, if you just listen to his music, he references the city, which it's awesome, actually.
Who said that?
Yeah.
Who said that? It was me, Yeli. I am the editor of the podcast, and my shout out today goes to the cashier at Chipotle today, where I got my Sofritas burrito an hour ago, and he was just really nice. He seemed like he had really good energy, like a really peppy, extroverted kind of dude. I think he was kind of new because he was a little nervous, but he was still had a good attitude. And yeah, I just liked him, It reminded me of when I was literally in his exact same position 2 years ago doing Greg at Chipotle.
Ooh. As a also former Chipotle employee, that guy was definitely new, because that upbeat attitude fades. it fades. As a former cashier at Chipotle, that shit fades, yo. I used to be chipper as all can be. Then after one day where we did we had some wild lunch rush, I'm like, yo, I hate all these people. I was like, what do you want? Oh yeah, you came here to buy food. My bad. But maybe that's just me. But enough about me being a disaffected youth. Let's get into some films about disaffected youth. You know what I'm saying?
我今天下午去新凤宫拜饭，你知道那仙姑怎样说我们家小康？他说他是罗刹三太子投胎转世的。
First film on the docket is Tsai Ming Liang's 1993 film, of course, Rebel of the Neon God, which follows Sao Kang, a teen who decides to drop out of his cram school without his parents knowing and pocketing the tuition money. The movie is very, I wouldn't say very, but it's unclear as to why he does this, other than him being kind of just disillusioned with the idea of school and his life. And after a chance run-in with Ase, where Ase breaks Saikang's dad's driver's side mirror on his cab, he becomes almost obsessed with him. That's the best way I can describe that. If anything, he more so wants to just follow him and find out more about him. He's just interested. And the film doesn't doesn't really choose a side as to what his motivation is, which I've heard is like Tsai Ming-liang's like one of his touchstones is just like his characters are motivated, but he won't let you know what motivates them. And I think that's what like really what I've always liked about the film. But Owen, why did you choose it?
I chose it mainly because it was on my watch list forever, and I had never watched it when we were going into the programming of like picking what we were going to program for this term. And it was on my watch list because it's one of my favorite YouTubers' favorite movies. Shout out Drew Phillips. And so I had always kept putting it off to watching it, and then I had seen a clip on Twitter, which is how I programmed Roma too. But I saw a clip on Twitter. And then I was like, I need to watch this. And so then I ended up watching it, and I really liked kind of the kind of wandering nature and, like you said, the ambiguity of like what's going on. And so I was like, sure, let's pick this.
It definitely felt like, in watching it and not knowing anything really about it before watching it, kind of those like day in the life type things, but darker, like not slice of life, but just the thing of you're definitely following teenagers. They are for sure going through puberty and very stupid, but also general, like, you're a teenager, so you're feeling a lot of emotions for the first time. So everything is very big, very intense because you have no coping skills. So you just vandalize someone's scooter to the point of no return.
Naomi, what did you think?
I'm not so sure. I do like the wanderingness of it. And I like how it depicts kind of like the life of these troubled youth or whatever. And so I really like kind of like the realism of it. And it's always nice personally. Like, for example, with both of these movies, there's a very stark contrast between the characters' home situations. And I find that I can relate to Rebels of a Neon God a lot more than the middle-class suburban life of Rebel Without a Cause. And that's something that I always struggle with a lot. Like before joining y'all and everything, I didn't really watch a lot of diverse movies, and so I'm just so used to seeing that suburban life thing, and I can never click or relate to it. And so I did enjoy that relatability and realism in Rebels of a Neon God. Also, the stalking, I actually kind of quite enjoy that because I totally understand that. Like, I am definitely that person that I will see somebody in public and I'm like, I want to know more about you. Like, I want to know where you live and what you do, but I would never actually stalk someone. So
okay,
this is the one who asks everyone, every employee here, our daily routine.
See, I was gonna say, I'm like, don't believe in policing, but what have you been up to?
My own intervention in this moment.
Like, what's going on? But no,
I personally, especially right now, am very disillusioned with what is real life. So I like knowing what other people do just to compare, just to be like, what even is living, you know?
Well, I think that this movie is like a very good quarantine movie. And like I think in like a good in like a way that is like you can project your feelings onto it, and also good in the way where it's like there are moments which really made me miss being outside too. We talk about this a lot, but it's hard not to. I mean, there's a pandemic outside, dog. Like, of course we're going to talk about it, but like specifically when they're in the roller rink, even when Sao Kong's when he's by himself and just like roller skating in like such a very almost creepy way. Like I read reviews and like theorists talk about this movie and how like in some way, and then like apparently in a lot of other Sao Ming Lang's movies, I've only seen this one, unfortunately. like his characters kind of, specifically his main character, who is usually played by this gentleman, have like this kind of listlessness about them that is almost kind of haunting. They just meander through whatever cityscape or whatever the setting is without a clear destination of where they're going, and if they're even enjoying themselves. Like when he was just roller skating, I felt like he was just trying to feel what Isay felt when he was there, or something, or he just wanted to feel. That's the biggest thing I got from this movie. Let me cut that right there. Is that it's just wanting to feel something, but like being, I wouldn't even say being robbed of it, but like not achieving it no matter what you do.
Yes.
This is a great depiction of what dissociating looks like that thing of connection and generally like feeling. It felt very out of body because you do watch in multiple instances of the main characters being in that same space, but like at different times. The way that they interact with their environment in following Zhao Kong, like he doesn't really interact with most people. Like for the most part, he is an outsider watching or in the background of a shot or just generally there. And then when you're following him, he doesn't interact with everyone, but everyone's around. It kind of like, not at all in the similar vein, but the movie Her, as far as the fact that like Joaquin Phoenix is on his own space, having this like goal as far as like, he very much like Zhao Kong makes this connection that I wouldn't say is made up because they do end up interacting. Like he kind of meets his idol, so to speak. Like they do act, but it almost is like worship versus any kind of like rivalry, but becomes that. Like he's kind of internalized this monologue of like, I have to do the thing. Like I don't know. It got kind of weird and just where I went, teenager. Everyone's horny and frustrated about that. So
and I think that's what this Something Long doesn't hide away from, is just a lot of humanity in the way where like he lets his characters live. Like we see them like drink. Like the one thing I thought was interesting and that I saw someone write about is that he lets his character drink water, and I can't think of a movie where like you see a character drink water, where it's like, think about it, like where it's not like they're being poisoned or something like dramatic. It's just they're drinking water because they're thirsty. It's usually like, it has to be like alcohol or some way or whatever. It has to be like it has to be like thematic. And I'm not saying that it is not thematic, because water comes up often in this movie, almost in a way that reminds me of Roma, where like it's like an inevitability. Like it seems like it's always raining. Every texture seems damp. Like I remember there was a scene where it's like one of the earlier scenes, which I thought was very interesting in establishing the separateness of Hao Kong's life and Azay's life, is where after like robbing like a phone booth at night, he rides home in his motorcycle and he sleeps all day while Cao Kong goes about his day going to drop out of school. But there's a moment where he gets up out of his bed, Asay, and he has like just like a good amount of like beads of sweat on his back, even though it's raining. And I find it interesting that like almost every exterior, every setting is just like at like a moment of like dampness and just being
humidity.
Like it's like water is so like, I mean, Azay's house or apartment is being flooded consistently, almost to a point that is annoying. Because I can't say like I can live like that. If I don't have any control over it, I probably have to. But I hate stepping in water. Yeah. So like, just like he walks through water a few times, I'm like, it makes me like shudder a little bit. But I think if anything, it's thematic in that sense, where it ties a lot of things together, where it's like the water is like an inevitability that in some ways symbolizes like the life that they can't escape, I would say.
There's that one scene I think that kind of epitomizes that point, where it's towards the end when he comes back with his friend after he gets beat up by those I don't remember, it was like the computer chip, the people that were arguing with them over the computer chips.
The owners of the arcade.
Yes. When his friend gets beat up and he takes him back to his apartment, and he's like shoving the cloths like in the drain, but then the water ends up spewing out, just kind of like he's trying to shove down a lot of the problems, and then he has that breaking point in his room where he's just kind of like, what's going on with my life? Like everything is bad right now. And then right after it, and I don't even know what their relationship was, him and the girl, but they kind of like have their own tuft, and it just kind of like epitomizes like just how they can't keep the water, like things from boiling over, if that makes sense. Overflowing.
Something that starkly like set the tone for all the things that you guys have brought up was the beginning in which now I'm conflating the two and I can't remember which, but one of them, the brother like walks in on person who is peeing in the bathroom, and her putting foot against door, and like he wades back through the water and goes to his room and just sits there and waits to like listen to her walk by to go use the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, this is like frank and honest as far as like, I mean, Tracy, that's a great point. I didn't think about the fact you don't see people drink water, but it's like also if every movie had 30 minutes dedicated to people going to the bathroom, we would be bored. Like,
well, there's that too, though, that like you see characters go to the bathroom, and not in a way like we see characters go like to the bathroom because they have a stomach ache, and like it's part of, and it's not. I think it adds to what Yeli was saying, where it's like real, like it's realist in ways. Like I read a quote that he said that he wanted this movie to be as close to a documentary as he could get.
Amount of cigarettes that are smoked, it felt like that.
Oh my god, yeah.
As someone who cannot be around tobacco, like smoke, I was just like, I feel like I have secondhand lung cancer from watching this movie. Like, you are so beat up that your mouth can barely open, and you're like, give me a cigarette. Like, I'm like, there were so many cigarettes in this movie. Like, I don't think there are many scenes where people aren't smoking. Like, someone is smoking.
Yeah, it's big Taiwanese new wave vibes. People are always smoking, but you know, and also like, and to be like movie about it, it's really just cinematic to look at.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty movie.
Yeah,
I like the wide shots, or like being
like
able to.
Movies, but yeah.
Wait, sorry, what?
I mean, like smoking in movies is very cinematic to look at.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like sometimes it's just there because it's like it looks cool.
On the comment, looking cool. Also, when things are wet, light bleeds across wet, and that looks really pretty. Like if you watch any You're Gonna Buy a Motorcycle commercials, they're going through the rain because then all the lights are pretty on the street. Like that very much. What?
He said like you watch any If You're Gonna Buy motorcycle commercials. that was just funny the way he said that. That was all. Keep going. Good stuff.
Yeah. Overall, this whole movie is very pretty because also a lot of the advertisements are neon, and neon lights bleed a lot, and like that general shot of like lens flares and like smoke going over lights. It's very pretty and nice to look at, but I'm also like just watching it. So
But speaking of like how it looks and the prettiness, like I wanted to talk about a specific moment, which I think is where the cinematography really shines, and it's where Sai Kang is now on the Aze's trail, and he goes to the same mall that they're at and kind of watches them eat, and like the way that they position the frames, or the way they position the scene in general, is the scene starts with Aze, Ahui, and Ah Ping all eating together, and Ah Ping goes to get dessert, and he crosses paths with Sai Kang and in like a dessert shop, and then he goes back to where his friends are, and Sai Kang sits in the dessert shop, and the camera is right, almost like perfectly parallel, but not really, because there's like a little depth play there, where he's like adjacent to where they are, but through a window. And he can see them if he looks back a little bit, but we see the distinction completely. And I know like the thing that is annoying about this movie is that like you can't just say that, oh, it's about loneliness. It's like, is it? Because I don't know if he wants to be with them or not. He's just watching, kind of. And it's like, but that shot is like probably one of the best shots of the film, because it encapsulates what it's all about, is that like he's just on that trail. He's deciding to at least trail him enough to where he's still in distance, but he won't get too close.
Also, I just wanted to say the queer context of if you've ever been obsessed with someone, everything they do is like so interesting. That kind of endearment isn't typically shown between a man and a man in any capacity, no matter what age, because it's like, unless it's like really obviously stalkerish. Like in watching this movie, it took me a while to realize I'm like, oh, you're stalking him. Like it didn't click. There's nothing explicit about it. It's just implied. And I feel like it's very queer in that sense of longing to like be a part of someone's life. And also the relationship, I think it's being like the friend of Atsu with the mullet. Probably. Why do you have to beat up the mullet queers? Why?
Oh my god, yes, the mullet.
The mullet that is awful and I love it. And
it looks good. What are you talking about?
How did we get here? How did we get here?
But the general queerness of the longing of I want to be a part of this person's life, I want to know everything about them, while also looking at the queerness within like Atsu and Abing's relationship of like just general caring for one another. It was very interesting and very rewarding to see that in a male-centered movie, and every female is there kind of for a relationship with a man. So to have men talking about emotions is really good to see.
We love it.
Even though it was whack that Aze left Alpine to get beat up by himself. That was cold. I remember rewatching it, I was like, you just left the homie and then like ran away and it came back to him like, what happened? What do you think happened?
Yeah.
They cornered him and beat the shit out of him and he left.
But he got him a girl to hug him.
He did. He did. I guess that's the least he can do. But you know. Well, as you see in the title, it's Rebels of the Neon God, and this name wasn't just like, granted, it's like an English translation of it, but it is the Neon God is a thing, and it is from, I believe, like Chinese mythology. From like it's a god named Neza, and he was a childlike god who was very disobedient to his parents. Which we see that parallel in this film because Sao Kang's mom goes to like a Buddhist temple and learns about it, and then comes home and tells his father that she believes that her son is the reincarnation of this god. And of course the dad kind of writes it off, but in the terms of and even Sao Kang thinks it's funny, he writes it off. But when you think of the way that he maneuvers through this film and how he disobeys his parents, he gets kicked out of his home, and he starts to do things that to them is uncharacteristic of who he is, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying that like that's what the film is trying to say, that this character is this god, but I know that if knowing that information, because that's what one thing I was I've talked about it or discussed it with other people in one of my classes, is like how films that are, you know, quote unquote foreign, but foreign to you, how proper research or just information on the country, continent, or you know, area that it came from can inform your experience with it. Because I've watched this film before, I didn't know anything. I didn't know the Neon God was a real thing. I know that I remember that the mother makes a reference to it a few times, but I never like looked into it too much. I thought it was more of a metaphor. And upon my second viewing and actually we're like doing the research, I was like, oh, so that kind of underscores a lot of the issues at the center of the film, where it's, you know. But the thing about it is, though, parenting and family is very interesting in this film, because you see the dichotomy between how Sao Kang and Aze, because Aze seemingly has a family with his brother, but we see him only from the back, or see him leave, and then he's mainly just with his friend Ah Ping, or with Ah Hui. And Sao Kang has a full, you know, he has the dad and the mom who both care about him in some ways. Granted, they chide him after he accidentally cuts his hand in the beginning of the movie, but
his dad buys him sliced fruit.
Yes, his dad does.
That's the real show of affection.
That's like a real, like, I mean, I can't speak for y'all, but that's like the real like non-white parent thing to do. It's like, hey, like, I know I just yelled at you for 30 minutes, but do you want like some mango? Or like my mom was like, "You want some McDonald's? I'm going to McDonald's." I'm like, "Yes."
Mom's like, "Here, I know you like pepino. Eat it. It's yours. I got you it. Why aren't you eating it? I got you for it. I know that you like it."
I'm like, "Can I have an apology? No, that's not." No.
Coming home for the first winter break and my parents getting a big ass bag of cherries after having a disagreement and then being like, "You're leaving. You're the only one that eats them." And I'm like, "You got them." And they're like, "But it was to fix the argument." I'm like, "All right." So that, I mean, I am also white, so that is fair. No culture.
Listen.
You are not allowed to relate, Maddie.
listen. Anyone listen to this podcast? Remember, I did not say that. Maddie said that. I did not say that. I plead the fifth. Yeah, I forgot where I was at. The restaurant mall scene is like, encapsulates the movie, but it also encapsulates the movie where after like getting nothing kind of from her interaction with Aze, and starts to leave, Awe tells Aze like, "We should leave this place," and he says, "Where can we go?" And she's like, "I don't know," and he's like, "I don't know," and then they start crying, and I think I love that part because in the outline I wrote that this is like urban malaise without the melodrama, but like that's probably the most melodramatic it gets is that movie because it's very quiet in some ways and very slow and very meditative in some sense, and I think that is where like almost like the height of emotion happens is right then, and it's like it leads up to that point, and it covers the basis of the movie and what the movie is trying to say in regards to what these characters think they want and what they want that they can't get to.
Yes, and it parallels a scene in Rebel Without a Cause in which James Dean's character talks to I forgot her name. What's her name?
Judy.
Right. So it parallels the scene in which they tell each other we should leave. Like we need to get out of here. Where? I don't know.
Thank you for that, Naomi.
I'm gonna give a disclaimer / like say this to everyone else on this pod. Maddie's gonna make it gay this whole entire time because this movie's gay as hell. Like,
I mean, it's not a surprise. Like, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put it together with it.
I'm just letting you guys know. You'll make a point and I'll go, "That sounds gay," and yeah, it'll be annoying by the end.
Hey. So far, I haven't made an anime reference, so
I'm so proud of you. Yeah.
Hold on. Let's stop the podcast right now. Let's get a round of applause for Yeli for not bringing up anime. My God.
Thank you.
But I would like to know.
2 podcasts in a row.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the last one I didn't make a reference.
Oh, okay. But I would like to note to our listeners, the part that you didn't hear was our meeting before this, and she talked about anime then.
I did. You know I did.
But we do count this as a win for not only her but us too. So
right. So I'm the one who makes everything about anime, and Maddie is the one that makes everything gay.
Because everything is gay, folks. I am getting a degree in being gay, so I can say that.
Well, this is news to me. Just why are we moving?
Oh, do I have to spell it out?
You are not going to use me as an excuse again.
I don't.
Every time you can't face yourself, you blame it on me.
That is not true.
You say it's because of me. You say it's because of the neighborhood.
No.
You use every other phony excuse. Mom, I want to do something right. And I don't want you to run away from me again.
The tagline of this movie is "The bad boy from a good family." You're immediately introduced to this entitled white man who is very drunk off his ass, very sad because they have to keep moving towns because he keeps beating people up or getting in trouble, etc. And he goes, "You're tearing me apart." And I go, "We're watching The Room right now." And I just wanted to say that and like implement that this is one of the best like instances of why everyone knows and loves James Dean. Because spoiler, I guess, if you're unfamiliar with who James Dean is, he died within a year of this movie being released.
Yo, did you put a spoiler alert on someone's life?
Hey, hold on. The reason I did that is because I was going to say it's ironic that within this movie there's a car crash death and there's also someone breaking their neck, and that's how he died. I don't know why I sang it. Oh, that was kind of insensitive.
Hey, I didn't even know that he died early. I don't really know anything about James Dean except that white bums love him.
This man had anger issues, but also was very gay. he liked going fast in cars after being in the movie Giant, which he realized he liked racing cars. And I can't remember what scene it is in that, but he started doing it competitively within the shooting of East of Eden and this movie, Rebel Without a Cause, which was both 1955, and he died in 1955. Like, he died in a car crash. It was somewhere like on the West Coast, in which he and the passenger, who I can't remember, someone else who was famous, passenger was not harmed, but James Dean was not able to get out of the car and broke his neck on impact, and like he died at the age of 24, and he was 23 in this movie. So like James Dean kind of got to live in like that rebellious like disillusionment of youth in general forever and for eternity, because he never got old. So in this movie, there's a lot of gay context, which is why I get really excited about it, because also, in general, the character, what is his actual name? I know the nickname is Plato, but is it John? John is sort of like the
he's effectively called like Plato, though.
Yeah, he's the outcast kid. He's really weird. Definitely has those like, I would call it the media portrayal of psychotic symptoms of like antisocialness, general like demeanor. He shot and killed puppies, which is why he's
my man killed puppies. Like,
yeah, he's at the police station where James Dean is when he's getting arrested for being drunk, but they become friends because it's sort of that like outcast trope of James Dean is there, new to school with no friends, and Plato is just disliked, and then they're friends. So of course, immediately within one day of them being there, the popular kids are like, "We hate you. Yeah, we're gonna beat up you in your car unless you race us, and whoever chickens out loses, even though we can go off this cliff." I don't know. I didn't get that, and I don't know anything about 50s culture as far as like car racing. I think of Grease, which plug.
Oh
man, come on!
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Come on!
Yes.
All right, thank you for listening to the Fifth Avenue podcast.
When it's not about anime, it's about musicals. Let's go, baby.
But to speak life to that 50s comment, I had a professor who, when we talked about this film, she mentioned that 50s culture was, especially for men, young men, cars were like a very big like masculinity symbol. If you had a car, you were that guy or whatever, but cars were like a big thing because it was getting to that point where like anyone had a car now. And that means like you can get your kid a car, especially like during the whole like middle class boom, whatever, of the 50s, where like it's a lot of American values, and so the whole chicken thing kind of makes sense in that context, because it was like the like ultimate test of masculinity. It's like, in a way, and like I don't want to make this like jokey or explicit, but it's like a cockfight kind of, like it's like whose dick is bigger type thing. It's like, I got the car. Like, it's not even the thing about it is, though, that contest specifically isn't about the car. It's about who has the quote unquote proverbial balls to stay as close to the cliff as they can. And because usually the way this works, from what I remember with history, is that it'll be more about going head to head, not a cliff.
Yeah.
The cliff part makes it a little weird, but it would be like a chicken game where it's like, one car here, one car here. We go as close as we can. Whoever moves, loses, whatever. If you want to make like a very general take, you can say that it's like a metaphor for the entrappings of masculinity that can literally kill you. You can literally die from it, from falling deep into like that cauldron of toxic masculinity. But yeah, this film is interesting given its context of the time period, because I think around this time a lot of countries were also in their disaffected youth wave, where like everyone was making a film about kids that were upset with the status quo. Like I think Vietnam was happening around this time, or began this year, something like that. And it kind of shows, like, I think Jim is shown as like what this picture perfect idea of the American family and the American neighborhood and the American high school and the American man or young boy, how in ways that can be wrong. And I don't know if this was all purposeful, but I know that it seems like, in a way, not like a very large critique of it all, of that concept of American culture at the time, but I do think it is one, without whether in the director or James Dean or whomever was on it knows it or not. And the implementing of Plato is interesting because he is weird, but we don't know why. They don't give us a clear reason why. Like, yeah, they say he's like,
his parents are allegedly loaded because he lives in like a little mini mansion, but like his dad's dead ? Or he might be off somewhere else, and his mom said it's too expensive to get you a psychiatrist, so I will leave you here with a live-in nanny and move to Hawaii. So effectively, he has been orphaned, not by choice.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, his like, I think his dad isn't dead because he found like an alimony check.
Yeah,
and it's
not a reliable narrative on his end because he does change the story a couple times.
I think it was like a metaphorical death. Like, I think like when he tells the story to like Jim and Judy, it's like, oh, my dad's dead or whatever. It's because he's kind of alone in that sense, to where it's like his dad, like he doesn't have a dad or anything. So like it's not like, I think what we discussed in my class too was that like Plato kind of comes in as a character who is, I wouldn't say a disruptor to this like idealistic society, but he is the outlier that, and he is deemed, psychotic or bad because of that. He's the one that doesn't have the nuclear family. He's the one who looks a little different. I think he's Italian in real life, but like he looks a little different. What'd you say?
He's Sicilian. Within this movie, in looking at a lot of these people, this is a separate side note, but I'm just laughing at my own notes as I look at them. None of these people look like high schoolers, and they're supposed to be high schoolers. But also, this is some of the better acting for the 50s that I can think of as far as emotion and not just reading a script. Because a lot of film noir is just like, I'm so lustrous for you, and it's very dramatic, but like, it's very deadpan. It's not really like, you can disagree with me, Tracy. You're the one pursuing film. I'm thinking of what the Marlon Brando brand of white man that knows one emotion, and it is smolder and horny. Like James Dean does a really good job of, the scene in the planetarium, in the observatory, in which James Dean like coaxes Plato out of hiding with the gun from the cops, like the patience and time and effort that takes, and the understanding of like just needing to like be patient and kind, and like having that between two men, again, parallels as far as like it's very queer. I will just drag this out talking about the fact that like Plato and Jim's character are written to be like star-crossed lovers, and Jodie is just there. Like,
see, I don't see it that way. I see it as just like, I see it as like Plato having a queer obsession of Jim and like idolizing him and having like this image, and Jim, and I don't want to like deny him of that ability to be queer in this film, but I feel like he cares about Plato enough to like
not reject it.
Yeah, not reject it, kind of entertain it, but like
it's Big Eden vibes, like best friend being
kind of like Big Eden vibes in a way, where it's like, I wish, and or like I think Jim misreads it, because the film tries to like, the thing about it is that the film tries to like use this like theme of like family, like I've been talking about earlier, and how like Jim even tells Judy, he's like, yo, we're his family. He wants us to be a family. Plato makes a lot of these like kind of like dad comments in a way, but doesn't say dad. He's like, he's like, next summer he's going to teach me how to like fish and hunt or whatever. And like, which is a very dad thing, but it's also a very queer thing.
He says when he almost shoots Jim, you're not my father. I say accidentally. He almost shoots Jim in like them being hounded by all the bullies of the movie who just don't like people being different. He has this very like internal, like, I almost killed my dad thing. And I understand found father figure, except it's your peer, so that's not going to work out in a healthy manner. But also just the general way that they go about what reads for it for me as more of a pure queer relationship rather than an idolizing thing, I think is the like observatory scene in giving him the jacket and coaxing him out, because the patience that he shows, I don't see of many father figures in the movies. I also, this is just a side note, like the dad in this movie I absolutely adore, because he takes on the role of every mom in the 50s as far as like being there, being weak-willed and meek, like not having the backbone to stand up to his wife, who is just like, all right, we're moving because our son's a little shit and killed someone, ? Which he didn't, but they did the stupid chicken race. But the dad just very much being like, not afraid of his wife, but generally like catering to her, but still caring more about his son. I can't think of another movie, especially for the 50s in the US, that portrays the father as the more compassionate one. And like the whole thing of the end of the movie being like, stand up, Jim. If you stand up, I'll stand up with you, because he's sitting there mourning. Spoiler, Plato gets shot by the cops, because of course he does. He also, in that moment, Plato is wearing Jim's jacket because like the whole coaxing him out. The dad of Jim worries that his son has been shot. So there is that moment you see him being like, my son has already had all these run-ins with the cops. That's why we keep moving cities. It was bound to happen eventually. The mom kind of whines about it in the car, as far as like, you never think it'll happen to you, but 13 cities later. And I'm like, bro, who has the time or money? Like I get that like the economy was different, but also like, how much do y'all make? Like, what? How do you just move that much? Like, that's a side tangent of I do like the male portrayals in this movie, especially for the US in the 50s, because men having a personality is actually kind of, I feel like, hard to come by. A lot of it ends up being toxic masculinity, especially white men. I'm saying this from a very US perspective.
Well, the thing about his dad, though, the conflict between him and his dad lies in Jim believing that his dad has a certain lack and that he's not the man that he wants him to be. And I think it's interesting that like how we receive it now, being as like his dad is the more compassionate one out of his parents, whereas at the time, at least for the Jim's character, I don't know if this is like a cultural, I wouldn't say this is like a cultural belief too, I mean, but it could be. His dad was seen as weak, and like Jim just wanted him to be quote unquote what a man should be, but which I find it funny because I don't think Jim even knows that either. And the whole roundaboutness of the film's ending, and of course the queer subtext is there. It's almost like blatant, but the idea of Jim adopting this father role kind of comes all the way at the end when he tries to protect Plato from the cops and try to get him out of there safely. And then when he subsequently gets shot, it's interesting that moment and Jim's dad seeing that moment finally brought Jim's dad to be what Jim wants him to be, because I think he tells his wife to shut up for the first time, and that is supposed to be a moment of triumph. So it's interesting because like I think the film doesn't want him to be seen as compassionate, but more so as like a father and a man that is lacking in some case.
It's accidental how compassionate they make the character. I don't think it was with purpose. They went, oh, compassion is coded as feminine. It's coded in the binary of opposite of masculinity, and he lacks masculinity and ends up inherently becoming feminine coded, which for all the people who are assigned female at birth, you're just supposed to be a therapist straight out of the womb. Like, I don't know, shout out to all my eldest daughters, even though I'm no longer a daughter. You're the family therapist now. Congratulations, you're not going to get paid. As far as talking about like women within this movie, it's pretty much Jody and like Jim's mom to an extent. But I just really briefly wanted to talk about the like opposite portrayal with the dads of Jody's dad is very much so what you expect of a male character, but also it's one of the first portrayals I can think of in a movie in which Jody seeks out the affection of her father in the way that like children do, of like, you kiss your kid on the forehead, you generally like, you kiss children and it's not like it's in a sexual manner, it's just affection to child. And she's a teenager and she goes to do that and he's like, you are too grown for that now. That could be interpreted wrong. And she's like, but I want that. And it's kind of uncomfortable because in the context of now, it's seen as sexual, but I would say for the time, having all of a sudden you hit puberty and you're someone that could have sex and your dad goes, yep, no more affection for you because you're a woman now. Like, that's kind of a bad way to navigate any relationship, but also very much standard for the time of distancing before you go to be married to a new man who is going to become your keeper, in the sentiments of the US in the 50s and the way that the institution of marriage was set up. But like very much so, her little brother, like she is the oldest daughter, and her little brother like the calling her affectionate names and then like kissing her on the face, and the dad being like kind of upset and looking down on that when it's like her just being upset because her boyfriend died in the movie. Like he dead. She doesn't talk about it because then they could be arrested. So like, hey, you get to internalize that for the rest of your life. I don't know. No processing here. Who needs therapy?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how they don't really. It doesn't really seem like they process the death.
No, they immediately ran, and the whole time I've watched this movie before, but I forgot how quickly they ran away. They were like, "Fuck, he's over the cliff. We gotta go," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't. There's no time for mourning because you gotta go to high school tomorrow." That's pretty standard for public education within the United States, but
well, also the fact that the movie literally happens on one day, it's hard to like. I don't know how much processing they could have done within like hours of the actual death, and being technically suspects in it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, them staying would have been a bad idea. Granted, it was funny that Buzz's the kid who died. His people, most of his people, not all of his people, but most of his people dipped out immediately, and then and then Jim and Judy stayed for a little bit, and then decided to go and get Plato, drop him off or whatever. But I do think, so I understand how like they kind of just moved on because it's weird and it's like the same night. But I do think it's funny that like Jim was like to Judy was like, "Yo, I know your man's just died, but like, what about you and me?"
Yeah, I was like 10 minutes ago, and she's like, "I'll think about it," and they move on. Like,
Hey, you want to come home with me? I mean, there's nobody home at my house. Heck, I'm not tired. Are you? See, I don't have too many people I can talk to. Who has? If you want to come, we could talk, and in the morning we could have breakfast like my dad used to. Gee, if only you could have been my dad.
You flipped or something. Look. I'll see you in the morning, okay?
I've got to pick up my scooter anyway, you know.
I know.
Rebels of a Neon God was obviously influenced by Rebel Without a Cause. I mean,
shout out in a Cause movie poster in the background that stands there for like a solid 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I saw Rebels of a Neon God first, and this is my first time ever seeing Rebels Without a Cause. Also, my first ever James Dean movie that I've ever seen, and I thought that it was going to be a lot more similar. Like, I definitely see the similarities and like how it was inspired and everything, but it was actually quite interesting how different yet similar they were.
Reasoning behind coupling these movies shows that there is a relation. I think they're in somewhat of a conversation with each other, except that in some ways, Rebel of the Neon God, I think less choices are made. And in Rebel Without Cause, there's like a lot of choices that, of course, ultimately become, that lead to like, terrible circumstances. But both characters kind of, in some ways, let the world move them. But Jim is more disruptive in it. Jim's like fighting back against a lot of forces, as in Rebel Neon God, like Sao Kang and Aze, like they kind of just let things maneuver. And Sao Kang finally makes a decision where he decides to pursue this person that accosted his dad's car and everything. And then, but the general connectiveness relies on like the idea of the disaffected youth in the city, because one of the things that we didn't speak about with Rebel Without a Cause is even though it might as well be a set, but its location, because it's technically supposed to be LA, and how like this modern city influences these people. I mean these teenagers the same way. I mean not in the same way, but like similar to how Rebel of the Neon God is set in Taipei city in Taiwan, where it's very much a character along with the rest of them, and the material conditions of the city, be it the busyness or the weather aspect of it all, does inform a lot of the decisions that are made and background a lot of the characters' feelings and emotions.
I think it also kind of contrasts in Eastern versus Western storytelling, where I think Rebels of the God, the narrative is a lot more open-ended and fluid, whereas, and it kind of doesn't really, there's not like set points really, I feel like, where Rebels of the Neon God is dramatized and I guess both of them rely on a lot of social constructs within their country. One thing I noticed about both of them was they both do kind of linger in a way where we were talking about this before the podcast, where Rebel Without a Cause is kind of like longer than it needs to be, or at least in my opinion. Or
Yeah.
kind of like
I
things just
agree.
take a lot longer to happen, which I guess that kind of was a flaw that I saw. I mean, I also will self-admittedly, I fell asleep in for the whole car chicken scene.
This is very much the white man drama of you gotta know how much he feels, so we're gonna drag it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it kind of like frills up the femininity, where the other one, it just kind of breaks down in the way it's depicted, I guess.
But to the connectedness of them both, I think one thing that Rebel of the Neon God gets or doesn't get, that Rebel Without a Cause gets, and that is closure. Granted, like Plato dies, but that event leads to Jim finding what he found what he wanted, and what he wanted was all all three of them together. Now he just has Judy, but he was able to have that for a little bit. Our characters in Rebels of the Neon God, they don't know what they want, but they want something. And this is capped off when after through after the movie, there's like on and off flirting from Aze and Wei. When they finally have sex, he kind of just gets up out of bed, leaves and goes to an arcade and like disassociatingly like plays a video game and then goes back. And you can tell up until the ending, it's like that wasn't enough. He still doesn't know what he wants. He's still unsatisfied, and it's this constant wanting and yearning, but not knowing what it is what you want, nor how you can satisfy it. And that, I think, Rebel Without a Cause gives that to their characters, but Rebel of the Neon God hangs it above them. Thank you for listening to the Fifth Avenue Podcast, where we come together to bring you the latest in all things cinema. If you like today's show, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Fifth Avenue Cinema, where you can also reach us for questions or comments. You can also reach us by email at film@pdx.edu. We hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we enjoy making it. Catch you next week on the Fifth Avenue Podcast, and remember that Black lives still matter. Abolish the police, abolish prisons, step down Ted Wheeler, and yeah, we love you.